So Chapter 1 provides an introduction to the textbook and to the subject of educational psychology. So the first thing I want you to do is to take this short quiz. It's just true or false. So go ahead and pause the video and take this short quiz, and then we're going to talk about it. Okay, so we're going to go through each one, and I'm going to talk about some of these myths, and then hopefully by the end of the semester you'll be able to gain a better understanding of them. So the first one is actually false. So there's really not a difference between left brain thinking and right brain thinking. Your brain works as one. So that's really a myth and something that you'll learn more about in Chapter 2. The second one is also false. So even though you can remember things for a short amount of time by repeating them over and over, really the best way to learn something is to commit it to memory by making different types of connections to other things in your brain. Number 3 is actually true. Students often misjudge what they know about a topic. They usually have a difficult time realizing what they don't know and what they do know. So we'll discuss several strategies for learning and understanding how development affects students' understanding of their true learning capabilities. So number 4 is also true. Anxiety can be helpful. Though it seems contradictory, a moderate amount of anxiety is beneficial because it helps you to remain focused on the task at hand. So obviously, if you have way too much anxiety, you're going to be stressed, and it can be debilitating. But if you don't have any at all, then it can prevent you from paying close attention to something. Number 5 is false. Tailoring instruction to students' preferences doesn't noticeably enhance students' learning or academic achievement. So you may have gotten this one correct because you know that we learn differently, but you'll learn specific strategies for teaching students in different ways. And so number 5 is false, as we just talked about. Number 6 is also false. So children's personalities are largely the result of their home environments, was the myth. So we're going to talk several times throughout the semester about not just home environments, but also genetics. So IQ and personalities and several things you'll learn about throughout the semester are actually a combination of both their environment and the temperament that they're born with. So the next one is number 7, and it's true, and I put in here sometimes. So, of course, there's video games that don't enhance learning, but there are a lot of video games or computer games that can promote a lot of cognitive learning. So video games can be effective if they're complex and involve lots of strategies, which a lot of the games today do, and lots of reasoning and trying to figure out different decisions and things to make. So definitely sometimes video games can be helpful. And then the last one is also true. So the way in which teachers assess learning influences what and how students learn. So we're going to talk about different kinds of assessments in Chapter 10, the last couple of weeks of the class. But you'll gain an understanding that assessments do play a role, because if a teacher uses a lot of multiple choice questions only, then students are going to prepare differently than if the teacher did a lot of projects. So that's definitely going to affect it. So be sure that each week you review the case study. It always gives you some insight into the chapter, and then it's explained also in the rest of the chapter. But it's an important part not to skip over. So this is the question. I'll let you pause it. So she hopes to gain respect from the students, show that she cares about them. She wants to empower her students. And so she tells them that they have to earn at least a C. She gives them lots of opportunities to revise and resubmit, gives them lots of feedback, and offers one-on-one instruction, and then even asks for their opinions to kind of help guide her in creating her policies. And so when she is going to try something new, she has her students agree on that, which, gives them some feeling of appreciation and helps them to think that the teacher cares that much more about them. So she does talk about what the different letter grades mean, and that helps them to have an understanding as well. So that's a good way to, a good example of teaching. So you want to make sure that the instruction that you provide is learner-centered, and we'll see this model throughout the semester, but at the center is the student. So you can learn about planning and learn about instruction, learn about assessment, learn about creating a positive environment. All of these things are things you'll learn in other courses, but most importantly, it comes down to the students. So we'll talk about a lot of developmental theories and learning theories throughout the semester so that when you're taking some of these other courses in your education classes, you'll have an understanding, you'll be able to come back to creating the best types of planning, instruction, environments, and assessment for the students. So Ed Psych is a discipline that studies human learning, development, motivation, and then applies different research findings, both from many years ago to current research, to help you and educators understand how to develop the best instructional practices. So we know that the current practices used have come from lots and lots of years of research. Educational psychologists continually conduct research and the best ways to learn and understand. They use both quantitative and qualitative, and even sometimes mixed methods, which we'll talk about. But there's different kinds of research, and that leads us to different types of conclusions. So if you have a cause-effect relationship, then that's going to be a different kind of research. Sometimes we only look at how things are related. Sometimes we look about how a certain type of intervention may affect something else. But all of the different theories and research over the years helps us to understand, explain, and even predict future research and behavior. So it's not always about common sense and logic, but we have information about how people learn and develop over time, how students differ from kindergarten to 12th grade, how we can help students be successful, and we use these as sources of information about teaching and learning. So all students are different in different parts of the U.S., and as time goes on, students are changing, so we're going to use the different theories to kind of guide us and how we develop lessons and instructional strategies. So all of the information about research in the field of Ed Psych can be found in these different places. But when we're talking about Ed Psych, we're talking about all these different things. So we'll discuss all of these throughout the semester. So there's quantitative research, which is numbers and percentages. It's going to describe the amount of things. There's qualitative research, which is going to be non-numeric information. So if you're doing interviews or observations, you're not counting things or percentages of things, but you're talking with people and trying to develop main ideas from different interviews. And this can also be case studies. So usually when you do qualitative, you may have a very small sample. Maybe it's 20 people, 5 people, sometimes just 1. And also you may, it may be at the beginning of your research because you don't have a survey already. You're kind of just talking with people and finding out information. And quantitative is going to have a lot of people because they're usually completing some kinds of surveys or tests or something like that. And so you can have large samples, and it's going to be research that's probably been around longer. And then mixed methods gives you both. So sometimes you start with quantitative and go to qualitative, sometimes the other way around, but mixed methods actually incorporates both the numbers and the interview type of information. So in looking at quantitative research, and this is for your quiz, you'll only be looking at quantitative research. but there's 3 different types that we'll talk about in the book. So descriptive describes a situation, and it just says, 80% of the people in the class are over the age of 13. It just provides information, 50% are male. A correlational study looks at relationships, so how 2 variables are related, like age and gender, or age and grades. So here's a couple of examples of correlations. So self-esteem and school achievement. So this is the sample and how they responded. So we could say the greater someone's self-esteem, the more likely they have a high school achievement. And then on this one, which is a negative correlation, the longer students took on their test, the fewer the fewer errors they had in their answers. So it doesn't, from a correlation, you cannot say cause and effect. We just know that there's a relationship, so you can say those who responded here were more likely to respond here, but you can't say one causes the other. So for that, you have to do an experimental study. And so in an experimental study, you have to have a treatment group and a control group, meaning one group does not have an intervention while the other group does. And that allows you to be able to say, this treatment we used caused this effect, because you had a group that didn't experience it and had no change. So that's what an experimental study does. And it's best if you can have random assignment to the treatment and control group. That's not always likely in education because we usually do it in existing classrooms. And then just remember, again, that correlation doesn't indicate causation. So causation is only evident in experimental studies. So theories help us to integrate and explain research findings. They're continually expanded and changed because we know that kids are changing and you bring in technology and all those other types of things. So we have to always alter theories. And then there's different theories focusing on different aspects. So, some focus on development, some focus on motivation, some focus on physical or cognitive. And then we take all these theories to help us both explain and predict behavior. So all of the different type of research helps us with that. So as a teacher, it's important that you keep up to date on research findings. So that's talking with colleagues, going to conferences, trainings, reading in journals and online. Learn as much as you can about your subject matter and the strategies to teach it effectively, because it's going to look different in different subjects. And then learn as much as you can about the culture and community that you're in. Make sure that you're always reflecting, so talking with colleagues, but even just making notes after every lesson you teach so that you can examine your practices and make changes for the next time you teach it. And then, like I said, talking with colleagues is important. And make sure that you do what you can to make a difference in students' lives. And just, if it's not working, then find some information to change. So it's important that as a teacher, you know your subject matter, you have a good knowledge of strategies for teaching, and then you also have a good knowledge of your learners. So one thing that we do all the time is research in education, and we do what's called action research. So always as a teacher, you're conducting this. You're identifying an area of focus, such as how to help students do better on their weekly vocabulary tests. Then you collect data. Maybe you try a new strategy and see how it worked. You analyze it and find out, did their grades improve, as an example, and then you create an action plan. You're going to try something different because their grades didn't improve, or that worked, but you want to modify it a little bit more. So these are kind of the steps in that action research project. So be sure that you kind of have an understanding of that. But this is a continual thing. This is something that teachers are thinking about all of the time. So you can read through the different types of strategies for effective learning and studying and think about, what should you do before, during, and after. Prepare before you study, and then review what you've studied afterwards. And you can review this that I've posted in D2L.